This is Taryn from Project Portfolio Office, and I'll be introducing the new Grid Widget. The purpose of the Grid Widget is to streamline the capture of data for multi-periods. This is specifically useful for cost data, resource allocations data, and potentially benefits data. So as an example, I'm just going to show you a cost list. So this is for an existing project. This is our business architecture blueprint project, and we've got line items for hardware as well as consulting fees over a multi-year project. So this project records costs over years and months. So as an example, you would see that on your cost configuration, your cost entity configuration, you would typically break down your data by category, subcategory, and potentially year and month. So this is an example where we have year and month, and you could have, depending on how your instance is configured, you could record it where you have a single custom list with year and month combined, or potentially using a start and end date for your cost records. If you are managing costs by subcategory and category as well as year and month, for something like hardware, if you've got a multi-year project, you could potentially have, if it's a 2-year project, 24 line items for hardware and 24 line items for consulting fees. In this case, this project has 2 subcategory items, hardware and consulting fees. So the inputs of this data, you would typically do that either using your copy functionality, which you find on a view page, or you could use your multiple edits. This has led to the introduction of the Grid Widget to streamline the recording of this data, because the two options that I've mentioned could potentially be time consuming. So I'm going to demonstrate this for you using my project. So I'm a project manager on a brand new project, and to be able to use the grid, you'd find that on your project view page. If I scroll down to costs, you'd find a new actions button which is called add in grid. If you access the grid for the first time, the grid widget for the first time, you'll be asked to configure your settings. This is something that you do as a once-off. PPL will remember your settings and you will not need to configure your settings again. Taking you through this, the editable fields. So this is your mandatory fields, and it's typically things where you want to configure, like your subcategory. You'd probably want to see your project name, but also all mandatory fields will be pre-selected. So even if you don't select it, so now I'm just going to select my subcategory line item, you'll see on the next screen that your mandatory fields will automatically be included. The measure, so this is important because this is the actual value that you want to capture for whatever period types that you select. In this case, I'm going to include my budget and my estimate to complete because this is a brand new project, and when you're recording your costs, you typically start with recording what your budget and your estimate to complete is. The estimate to complete in your world might be a forecast or projected spend, but it's actually usually the same as your budget before you've spent any money. The next selection is to create for 0 values. So if you've got a project that's running over multi-years and you maybe only have your budget amounts finalized for the first year, but you still want to get your records in for the second year, so you would choose to select create for 0 values. So while you might not have the actual amounts, you still want the records to be included. I'm going to start with the period type, and the one that is the most typically used in the configuration for our clients, and that's the year and month custom list fields. So if I select year and month, you'll see the custom list period that I'm going to select is here, and you will see there's an option to include all the items of your custom list. So your custom list, I'll quickly show you your year custom list. Let me actually just go back to choosing the year alone. So on your year custom list, you would typically have values included in the list, and If you've not retired old values, like in this case we've not, you will see all the values in that list if you choose to select all items in the list. I don't want to do that. I want to specifically select the values for the 2025 year. So here's that example where your custom list has not been cleared up, and this is something that your administrators can do, and they can deselect or mark these years as inactive to avoid you having a list that has got values that are no longer applicable. There's also some content, if you're not aware of this, on our product news blog, which explains exactly the process you will go through to clean up those custom lists. So going back to my grid, you'll see I just want values for 2025, my year's 2025, and my month is where it would make sense to select all the items in the list. So you'll see 12 months, 12 values in that list, and this is what I would have configured here. So if I save my settings on my grid screen, you will see that subcategory was automatically included because it's a mandatory field. Going back to my gear icon, I have the same functionality that's available to me on other list pages, like dragging and dropping and ordering the columns. I'm going to save that once again, and you'll see my category would be OPEX. We've got a handy option here where you've got a split screen and you'd be able to keep the values fixed. For now, I just want to add my consulting fees. I'm going to drag my screen over once again. I'm going to put it here, and you'll see that as opposed to having the rows that you used to when you're in a multiple edit mode, you now have columns. So instead of having 12 rows for my consulting fees, I now see columns where I can have this handy slider that allows me to move over to the columns following the current view. So here I've got 100,000 for my consulting fee budget, and I would record this. I can use the shortcuts on my keypad and just tab and control C and V if I needed to capture for the period. So I've got a 100,000 budget for consulting fees for the full year. I'm just going to get this information in. And maybe for the first 6 months is where I'm going to capture this data. So there you can see it. I can also go and include an additional row. So consulting fees was my first one, and if I've got more than one subcategory, I can select, in this case, potentially travel and entertainment, and I have a travel and entertainment budget of 10,000 Rand, $10,000. For the next 6 months. Okay, this method in which the grid allows you to get this data in seamlessly, and it saves huge amounts of time. So there we have our information there. If I just scroll here, make sure that my OPEX is selected. And now we have a handy preview button which will show you exactly the information that will be recorded. So I'm expecting 24 records to be created. I have 2 subcategories for the period of 1 year, so 12 consulting fees records and 12 travel and entertainment records. If I were to close this and submit, my information has now been recorded seamlessly. So here you can see, if I go back to my project view and check out my cost list, 24 records generated, 12 for consulting fees. So if I view my list, I would have 12 for consulting fees and 12 for my travel and entertainment budget. And there you have it. So just to navigate back to another one of my projects, which I'll use to show you the second method in which you can get your cost data in, and this is very dependent on how you've configured your cost entity. So if I go back to costs and I'm going to add in grid, we used the year and month selection on the grid. I'm going to change this and I'm going to use a date custom list field. So this is where your year and month is combined in a single custom list. Again, selection to include all items in the custom list. I don't want to do that. I want to specifically select the months for which I want to record my data. And in this example, I'm just going to do a 6-month period. So I've got January, February, March, May, June, and I've missed April. So I've included April. I don't need to change any of the values here or any of the configuration. I will save this and I've got exactly the same view available to me. So if I click on my OPEX once again, choose a different subcategory, this time I'll choose advertising and marketing, and I've got a 50,000 budget for every month of that 6-month period. And you can see keyboard shortcuts are really handy. And again, preview, I would expect to see 6 line items. My budget and my estimate to complete has been recorded. If I close this and submit, I have my 6 records created for me. And that is the second scenario of how you could do this. The third is where you have a start and end date used as part of your configuration. That is something that you would typically see on resource allocations data or benefits data where you've got a planned realization date, but I'll demonstrate it on the costs because I do have that configuration on this entity as well. So here, if I change my settings and select date fields, the first one would be start date, the second would be end date, and you'll notice that based on the period type, the values change for what you need to select. In the previous 2 examples, you need to select the values from the custom list. These are not custom list type fields, they're date fields. So what you need to choose is your interval type. Costs are typically managed on a monthly basis, so I'm going to choose the month option, and here you can select the number of intervals. If it's a 1-year project, your intervals should be 12, and you can include from when you want to start your records. If my project started in January, then I would probably have my start date being the 1st of January into February, so in this case I'm going to make it the 1st of March. And if I save this, I'm going to have 12 records starting from the 1st of March. Again, if I use my little freeze pane here and move it over, if I scroll, I have my 12 records, which takes me through to February of 2026. So again, if I select my category, which is mandatory, change this to possibly software licenses, drag this over and capture software licenses of 40,000 for the 12-month period. Because I have selected to create for 0 values, I'm going to record it for the first 6 months of the year, and as soon as we preview this, we'll have the first 6-month records created for us, and the rest would have our 0 values. Preview the screen, see your records, and finally we submit. So these are the 3 typical configuration types where you can make use of the grid. You would also have the ability to edit the information in the grid. So here's an example of where I'm going to show you how to edit in grid. This is existing cost data. The change that you would make would be on your settings, and you would go and include your spend value. So you would go and click include your spend, and once you've got your spend selected, you also see that you've got some handy error messages here that show you when data will be added, when data will be edited, and when there's some form of an error code. Because we have just gotten through January, I'm going to, for this project, select January for my period for year and month, and here is where you would want to select edit in grid and capture your spend amount for the month in the past. So even though I see values for future months, I'm going to go and select hardware and consulting fees, capture my spend, 45,123, and do the same for my spend of maybe 100k. If I preview this, it's going to show me exactly what I'm going to see for the spend that I'm going to update, and submit. So that would be a useful way to record your spend values in your monthly process. When your costs have now been received, you can now go and update the spend. Okay, so that's the grid widget. Another quick example is when you have resource allocations, you would typically have your resource allocations recorded for a period. This case, it starts and end dates, and you maybe want to edit in the grid and adjust percentage allocations for future months. So again, just configure the settings on your allocations. The editable field would be the project, would be the resource. The measure would be my percentage allocation. I'm not creating for zero values. These are date fields. These are existing records where I want to go and edit their percentage allocation. I'm going to start this from January, save, and now I have my grid view and I can adjust allocations accordingly. So you can see the allocations have already been set for the period, and I can now choose to go and adjust it and change this to 25 or 40% for the three resources assigned to my project. If I wanted to see this for the future months, I can adjust the interval types, see it for the future months, and go and adjust those allocations. And there you see it. So choose to update this for multiple resources all in a single view. Preview, you see the change, what that will look like for you, and submit. If you do not receive your weekly newsletter around new features, like the grid widget, remember what's new in PPO is available to you here. Alternatively, sign up to the PPO blog, put in your email address, first name, last name, click, and this will ensure that you receive our weekly newsletter, which includes new features that have been deployed to all existing clients. I hope you find this new feature, the grid widget, useful, and I look forward to seeing how you apply this in your environment. Thank you for watching.